This time, I take the Guzzi V7 on a road trip down to Bury St Edmunds. Tom jumps out of a perfectly good aeroplane. We look at some more much older aeroplanes and some really big guns. Before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Now with Tom about to start his university course, we thought what a really good idea it would be to have a bit of a man trip, head down south and visit a couple of museums, that kind of thing. And while we're on the way down there, let's try and fit in a skydive for Tom too. He'd been sizing up the idea since his birthday, but we had no time to fit it in. All the weather had got in the way. But we knew we were going to get a window of really good weather on the way down, so we thought we'd take the opportunity. Tom's jump was organised with Skydive Langer. They're based at the old Langer Royal Canadian Air Force Base and former RAF base at Langer near Nottinghamshire. They're a great bunch of guys and I heartily recommend that you use them. They really looked after Tom and he had an absolutely fantastic experience jumping from almost 14,000 feet in fantastic weather, and we got some tremendous pictures too. From the ground he was so high I could barely see the plane, let alone the skydivers. In fact, I didn't even know he was on his way down till the chute opened. Fantastic. And so after 80 miles of thrashing to death Tom's poor little 125, we found ourselves at Langer Airfield, ready for Tom's skydive.
Well, my keys are in my jacket in the top box.
Got anyone watching?
Yeah.
Okay. Parachutes yellow, purple.
Yeah.
Hi Thomas, how are you?
I'm alright, thanks.
And what are we doing today?
Jumping out of the plane.
Awesome. Why are we doing that?
Just how bad as well, to be fair. please enjoy it.
Yeah.
It has to be said that Tom is a usually fairly understated sort of person, but I know he really got a lot out of the skydive. I can tell because normally he never speaks over the intercom, but for about 2 hours on the way down the M1 he talked about nothing else. It really was a hell of an experience for him. Our overnight destination was Bury St Edmunds, which in total gave us a trip of about 180 miles that day. Tom's 125 performed excellently, I have to say, over such a big distance for what is a pretty small bike. The V7 was, as usual, excellent, and just thumped away the miles without any trouble whatsoever. But I have to say, the V7 seat is not as comfortable as the one on my V11. But you can't have everything. A large portion of the route takes us down the A1. Strangely, this is the first time I've ever travelled down this particular road. I have to say I quite enjoyed it. It was a lot more fun than the M6, M1 route that we normally end up taking. Compared to those roads, the roadworks were fewer and the congestion milder. After the A1, it was a simple matter of jumping on the A14, loop around Cambridge and take the road into Bury St Edmunds. All very straightforward and not at all unpleasant. Well, by motorway standards, not really a big fan of motorways. They're not really what bikes are designed for, are they? But in such pleasant weather, even a trip on a dual carriageway or motorway can be enjoyable and relaxing. Bury St Edmunds is a market town, established in around 1080, and not surprisingly, it's the site where St Edmunds was buried. Obviously that's where the town gets its name from. Disappointingly, this has nothing to do whatsoever with Edmund Blackadder. Shame. Still, the town is a very pleasant place to visit. It has its own cathedral and an abbey just outside of town, and there are also a number of other historic and interesting buildings to see also. And there's even some wildlife on the outskirts too. We spotted this deer on the way out of town. The next day, it was up early. Well, early-ish. I did have a teenager in tow. As we set off for the 30-odd mile ride down to the Imperial War Museum at Duxford. Unfortunately, keeping in tune with the trip so far, the road was mostly dual carriageway. But the weather was fantastic. So I suppose you can't have everything. On arrival, we were greeted by the RAF Memorial Flight's Lancaster bomber, which had been serviced, ready for next season's air show. The museum was originally Duxford Aerodrome, constructed during the First World War. It was used during the Battle of Britain, and later on during World War II by the US Army Air Force. Duxford houses most of the Imperial War Museum's larger artefacts, including some 200 aircraft, military vehicles and small naval launches. and some rather interesting artillery too. The museum also holds its archives, film and documentation at the museum.
Jesus.
To keep children amused, and Tom of course, there were interactive displays also.
We'll just let it flow. We'll just let it flow. It'll be alright.
Items on display demonstrate the whole history of aviation in this country, from the Blenheim bomber to later World War II artefacts and captures, and later post-war aircraft like the Hawker Hunter and the Gloucester Javelin. Aircraft are also restored and repaired here for use in museums as static displays as well as flying aircraft. As a lasting tribute to air crews of the US Air Force who sacrificed so much during World War II, architect Norman Foster designed a purpose-built exhibition hall which houses a very large and fascinating collection of US aircraft. This includes the mighty B-52 strategic bomber, the F-4 Phantom, and various World War II and Vietnam War era and of course earlier aircraft. There's also a U-2 spy plane and the incredible SR-71 Blackbird. The Land War Exhibition Hall houses the Imperial War Museum's extensive collection of vehicles and heavy artillery pieces, which date back from World War I through World War II and right up to pretty much the present day. This is of course not all British. Much of the equipment comes from Russia, Germany, the United States and Japan.
You know, Whiskies, do they not see the tiger right there? Look, he's looking the wrong way. They're looking tiger. You're right. Look, they've done it twice. Well, they've manoeuvred it, they've done twice, put it in.
Some of the displays have an almost diorama feel to them, and this gives them an important sense of place. It makes them relevant and understandable. It gives them a story. And to me this is something that's lacking in the Imperial War Museums in both London and Manchester. These seem rather aseptic. There seems no relevance to them. And for me they just don't work as well. Because at these sites, the artefacts are often treated as if they were pieces of art, which they clearly are not. They're historical pieces that need context. To take away their context is to take away their power. After all, these were vehicles designed to take life, and that's not something that should be taken so lightly. The Imperial War Museum at Duxford can make for a rather expensive day, but it's well worth a visit. There's an awful lot to see there, and you can take many hours to get round. So in the end we reflected on what was an excellent day. And so with our brief trip over, it was time to head back up the dual carriageway towards the north. The trip passed relatively uneventfully, although the weather gradually deteriorated and the last few miles were in torrential rain. This has been fairly typical of our trips this year. Every time we've gone out it seems like it's going to piss down and make life truly miserable, but it always waits until we're just about home. Still, didn't ruin the weekend for either of us. Well, I do hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course stay safe, and thanks for watching.